I think we can easily do that. Well, and we're gonna Monday, if they don't work, my files are also not. And then they were both interested in. Thank you. Yeah, I think something. She's gonna screenshot this and check. Yeah. Very close to the outside, so we're outside. You know. Yeah. Very close to the outside, so. I think
Yes. Not the year before. Yes. So we have this week.
okay, I will get it this weekend and then. No.
What day of the week do you have free? Yes.
This week's kind of a stinky one for me, probably
Yeah.
tomorrow's about the same day. Kansas City for a bus trip, so it'll be light.
No. I can do it tomorrow if you want.
Oh, yeah, you're the parent.
I'm not- I can do that anywhere between 3:30.
Let me see if you.
did. I did. Yeah. I'll look through the next. Oh, we did. We did? I don't know if he. I saw it fill out.
Just let me know when and make time. That'd be great. Yeah, that last hour of the day would be great, any day. Yes, we have a special, except for Fridays. We invite.
This week, later Thursday. Did you get my?
I did.
Okay.
I didn't know if you maybe didn't check all the boxes, you just really want to make. Maybe I didn't.
Sorry, I just did like the best. Sorry, I didn't know how.
Yeah.
Quickly I.
Well, and I
This
know
week
it
is,
used to be. They restricted what they want.
Oh,
of course.
So a lot of things you just don't check any box that works and you look. for it.
Okay. Tomorrow, Thursday evening after 7 would work the best this week. Next week, Monday after 7.
right, I can go later. than times I select.
Okay,
I
and
just
I
didn't
had
want
to
to
go
be
that
late.
Sorry, I was just like,
You probably can't come in. For the most part.
I mean, I could come, I could, but if it was like earlier in the morning, I could come, or earlier in the afternoon.
And I don't think Hope.
yes,
That's why.
yeah.
So I think we done it.
It changes from week to week. We don't have set schedules, so. But yeah, like this week is.
I don't know if I marked tomorrow evening, but Jason and I were going to get together for scholarships. Yeah, or unless we went out later.
I can go anytime. Cohen's the bomb. If I'm not working on scholarships, I'll be working on cleaning the yard up.
But we could probably go earlier.
Yeah.
I can get this.
Jason, I could probably leave earlier. The schedule's more flexible and I.
Well, it doesn't sound like tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
I cannot at all.
Oh, okay. I thought you said tomorrow.
Those are contracts that I've also, that folder there, but I've also got them signed already because some of them don't have. Some of, one of them doesn't. So if it's already, if you've already signed it, obviously, just
Oh,
skip
okay. So some of those that were contracts that we were new contracts. She had. to
Yes,
sign by.
yeah, or.
She was
1
gone.
week,
Yeah.
1 month, 1 month, I've got. And the next month. hopefully, Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, I can look at that email again when I get home.
I can-
Click through more.
Well, Thursday.
It would,
Who's off for 10 minutes after?
This Thursday doesn't work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You have way more for teaching training than they are than most.
yeah, then I'll look closer at next week to see what.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I was nervous a little bit.
Friday, honestly, would work the best for me, but.
Well, typically I don't, but Friday. after-
Sure, I
But
get it.
I will. I think the Carmen has some. One of my coworkers, we had a discussion. She said, "Would you make me play with you?" You know, she said, "Yeah, it's her last name." Yeah, I should tell her. But she-
Shelley?
Shelley.
She's retiring or quitting?
Oh.
Retiring. Did not know that.
So there's just like a checklist. And I didn't really. I don't know how she- From just observing what my son, because I'm asking about syllabus and stuff, so she probably. I bet they're all. One of them. Yeah, but I think that's all. Well, I don't know if you have to, because I didn't, but I just do credit. So. I don't know.
Me.
No,
You did everything.
I mean, I don't have great penmanship, but.
I can read it. Come on.
There's a J
There's a
and a
J.
B. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't blame you. I probably wouldn't
Well,
want
that's
to.
GW.
Oh, really? Sorry.
There is a J and a B in there too.
Yeah.
And there's a J and there's a B in there too. It's there.
You can be a doctor with that
I-
penmanship. Oh, I can not. Very nice. I'll give it back to it. I can't read this. We use these, take it, so I can read it, so I can. But then, I mean, But. most of us are electronic, so. But yes, it does. Yes.
That must be. Just want to make sure one. Right. I don't, this was only. The same thing with the.
Sign a teacher contract.
Yeah, well, since it was on the agenda.
Would you like? Which one?
That's actually yours, yeah, I made this.
Yep, I thought I signed it.
Yes, I brought it back. I wanted to get it.
Do all right.
What is she?
Did my full call.
Yeah.
Go ahead and ask for a motion to declare open meeting.
I'll make a motion to close.
Motion by Jason, second by Mary. Roll call vote. Bobby?
Yes.
Lisa, yes. Hope? Yes. Mary?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
JW?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0. Welcome, everybody, to the meeting. Notification of the Open Meetings Act is on the wall of the library. And notice of the meeting is posted and published as required by law. We do not have a presentation by our students today, so we'll go on to the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion that we do the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion by Jason, second by JW to approve the consent agenda. Jason, do you have any discussion? JW?
No.
Anyone else have any discussion?
On the financial information, I did attach. She had explanation. Oh, we do have, one of our other credit card came in today, so that went ahead and added US Bank. That wasn't on the original, in the original package that was sent out, but it is in the copy that we shared, the copy that has the spreadsheet on the front. And so the dollar amount would be just slightly more on the electronic fund transfer. So what it would change in the minutes, it would change the online transfer from $7,401.05 to $8,235.32. No, I don't think so, because it's as presented, so it's presented.
Sabrina, I apologize for not bringing this up earlier, but I did notice item 13838, the ESG4. So would that not be that included the behavioral?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's really about the lowest I've seen that number a long time. Usually it's run as high as 40,000 a
Yeah,
month. And
right,
so,
that's what I was-
so we contract for pretty much all the services, special education services that we don't provide in-house. Of course, we now, there are school psychologists, full-time in-house versus contract. And actually, our total cost to the district is less than it was when we were contracting and we had someone show up 3 days a week. And it's not because the service unit is overcharging, because it has to be close to all, they can't make money. It's just, when you can get someone like that, you can do it in-house. There is an opportunity to save money. It was thought that we had before, it just staffing opportunity never presented itself. So, but that would be ideology. And honestly, some of of our expenses are just down a little bit this year. Because I think I don't see Joel as much as I have in the past. And we don't have as much, say, deaf and hard of hearing support maybe we have in the past. So, and that's a pretty low number, but we pick some of those expenses in-house, low compared relative to what it's been in the past. And that's billed over 10 months. And then they just, they kind of, Ellen Stokebrand, when she puts that together, she takes an estimate of what it's going to be, and then we bill it, I think, September. So it's September through June, and then July and August, they just bill as, so if they do provide any summer services, it's just hour per hour. And that way, it helps. He does it that way to help schools with their budget. So anytime there's a change in services, she sends them a message. And then about this time, probably the May board meeting is when we start to see that final readjustment for to reflect actual hours. Because it's all broken down by
Any other questions or comments before we vote on the agenda? And we'll go to approve the consent agenda as presented. Lisa, yes. Hope?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
JW?
Yes.
And Bobby? Yes. Motion carries 5-0. Okay, we will move on to public comment or correspondence. There's no public comment or correspondence, then we'll move on to the committee report. Policy committee.
Well, we tried to meet electronically as a policy committee this last. And you know, when we get to that section of the agenda, there were only 2 policies. We didn't, the 3 board members didn't really feel comfortable where we were at. But those 3 ladies had to work schedules. It's hard to find a time that works for everyone to meet. But we want to try to iron out some things by meeting first. So if you're wondering why there's only 2 policies on the agenda, just haven't been able to, and I have some ideas. I haven't shared them, maybe an idea that would work a little better, but we'll wait to meet in person. Discuss that.
We are waiting for policy, anything to add. On to administrative reports. And we'll start with council report.
I'll just start with college visits that we have gone on. March 14th, we went to Midland. I had sophomores and juniors. Really great visit. A lot of the students said during the visit, I can really see myself here. They liked how close everyone was, the small atmosphere, great faculty. So I got really, really good feedback. And you can see some of it in our report there. March 30th, we went to SEC Careers and Health Day. I had a smaller group. I had sophomores and juniors. This was planned for the fall, and then with football happening, it got pushed to the spring, which was fine. That's very, very hands-on. They practiced IVs, they packaged mock medication. They created dental molds. They did lots of hands-on stuff. The girls liked it. They said they loved the hands-on, and it was just very, very well. Upcoming is we have April 12th, SEC Beatrice Discovery Day for freshmen, and then April 14th is Lincoln Discovery Day also for freshmen, and then that should be the end of our college visit, I guess, time. Spring. Hopefully next meeting I'll have some good data from the college access grant to kind of gauge where we started and then kind of where we are as far as college programming. Joel Coles, we have some updates there. I still meet with each group, elementary, middle school, and high school once a week. The elementary group has kind of changed gears a little bit. Instead of teaching lessons to the younger grades, they are planning their own PBIS pep rally. So the April pep rally that was going to be planned by Mr. Sephora, the elementary leadership group is doing all of it. They are writing the script, they are planning the activities, we are rehearsing, they are making certificates. At our weekly meetings, they share what tasks they have completed, and then we assign new tasks. And I think it takes some serious guts to get up there in front of your peers and lead an entire pep rally. So I'm really proud of them for that. The middle school group is still teaching lessons to the K through 5th grade. And with our elementary not doing it, then our middle school group take on a little bit more. The 6th grade is teaching to grades 3 through 5, and then 7th grade is teaching to K2. After each lesson, I just do a quick debrief with the group, and they're learning a lot. One of the questions that they have for Joe when he comes is, we know that we're leaders, and we know we have to set an example, but we know we can't be bossy, because then people won't really follow us. So how can we have the balance between the two? Which I think is a great question. The high school group is continuing with their PC1 campaign. They really want to take the rest of this year to create their plan just so it can run smoothly, and then we'll see tomorrow morning. Joe will be here on April 17th. The groups are looking forward to it, just to ask him some questions and to kind of get some things ironed out. Pre-ACT, this is an update. Sophomores took the pre-ACT on March 21st. Our scores came in on Thursday afternoon, and very, very pleased with what we saw as far as scores go. I will use this data to have conversations with kids, strength areas to grow, and then potential careers based on their answers with an interest in which was good, but very, very good scores. Very, very pleased with them. This is also an update. We had a SendCap Blue Credit Informational Night. This was March 27th. Out of the 19 kids in the class, I had 14 students and their parents attend. All 14 kids were able to apply for the SendCap Blue Credit program that night. And I'm just meeting individually with a couple students and parents that interested but weren't quite able to attend that night. My college access grant was able to pay for meals for the students and parents, which I think helped get a lot of them there. I've asked several for feedback, and it's been pretty positive. So we'll do that next year. Huge thanks to Lisa for helping me out that night with the application process. Student class registration. For class schedules, I've been meeting individually with kids incoming grades 9 through 12 to create their schedules for next year. I have a handful of meetings to go, but overall it's gone smoothly. Students sign up for a time to meet with me. We talk about the courses that they take in graduation progress, and then the courses that they're interested in taking. And then I meet with the incoming 6th and 7th as a group, and I will meet with the incoming 8th graders this week. And also kids who are taking SendCap Blue Credit classes, we're able to register for those as well. So we're making good progress with class registration for next year.
Any questions for Mr. Volkett? Thank you.
Okay. First, I really appreciate having Mrs. Leckett here to give her reports. I know that that's another thing. There are often times that there are things that I would want to report on, but she's able to speak in a much more informed manner. So I'll always try to minimize redundancies. There are a couple things tonight that I just wanted to elaborate on a little bit. But we'll just start with academic again, like usual. So the main focus outside of the classroom right now, academically, is creating the schedules for next year. And she kind of minimized it. It takes a lot of time for her to meet with all the students. And I saw her notes that she had, I think, 10 left. But so she's spent a lot of time lately scheduling times with students, or students scheduling times with her, and getting those schedules created for next year. So we're almost done with that. One thing I also wanted to elaborate on is she said the pre-ACT scores were returned, and those were great. So the mean went up from the most recent school year. But having said that, I think what was kind of surprising to me afterwards was in a few conversations that I had with students was how much confidence they seemed to have gained after seeing the pre-ACT scores. When I was asking them questions about what they thought they could get on the ACT next year, their answers were all of a sudden high. So it was really encouraging to hear that. But having seen the scores and that having been a concern of mine in the past, I was really pleased with what we saw from the ACT. So it'll be exciting to get the ACT scores back soonish too. As far as activities go, obviously spring sports have started. We've only had one track meet so far here. High school's been attending meets already, but we've only had one here, and it was a junior high meet, the one that HTRS hosts here. It's always a great way to start the year. For any of you that have been to junior high track meets, you know, it's kind of like herding cats at the beginning. They're all new to it, but they're all excited for it. And it's a great, I mean, it's a great day when you've got hundreds of kids out there trying their best at what they're doing. It's pretty awesome to see. But it's a small meet, so there are only 5 teams here. So it's a good kind of trial run for everybody for the beginning of the year, which is also a good trial run for our new press box. And I'll get to that at the bottom here. So, but anyway, it went really well. This week we have 2 more meets. We've got Lewiston meets and tomorrow, and then we've got our junior high meet on Thursday. So another busy week. A couple things coming up, or at least something coming up, is honors banquet. I just wanted to touch on that with the board really quick too. So last year we tried a different format, and we combined the 2 banquets, athletic and activity, one, leaving FFA to still host its own. At the time, we were obviously concerned about trying to squeeze too much in at once. And in hindsight, I think that was a good decision. So it was a manageable night. But if we had attempted to add FFA onto it, would have not only been too much for one night, but it would have diminished, I think, some of the quality for the kids. We will still have the FFA banquet separately, but we'll have the honors banquet for activities and athletic programs at the beginning of May. We'll do it again the same way as we did last year. It seemed to work really well, where we were able to have a caterer and the booster groups help chip in to make the cost per meal very manageable for all the those that attended. Again, just like last year, we sent out, I think, 7 letters to anyone in the area that had worked at school or expressed interest or shown competency in catering an event of that size. And again, we only got 1 bid returned this year by Taher. So, but I know Karen takes a lot of, last year she was able to get a guest chef to come because she takes a lot of pride in what she does. And so I know she's got a great meal planned this year too. She was excited because she was able to, for a similar cost, able to make sure that she had a really nice menu, including brisket as an option. So it'll be a nice night for families again. One thought, in addition to that, we do have the updated banners for the gym ready. So we have those for the state runner-up and state champion over the last 3 years that needed to be added. Now we have the equipment to add the letters or the numbers on the black banners ourselves here. So we'll be able to update those more efficiently. So we kind of been taking the inventory on that. We'll need to add the numbers, but we have the new red banners in place. And so we will at the latest have those by Wednesday. A few miscellaneous items really quick. We've had a team that's focused, as I reported before, on our mental health institute programming. That's through the ESU, a grant funded program. Our next step was to assess what we did this year and report on it. So last week, Mrs. A and I completed that assessment reporting aspect. And the next step is planning for the upcoming year. And we have some good plans in place for that once they've been finalized and completed, and we have our work days soon and all the programs on this. The auditorium window, we've continued to communicate with them. Back in December, we were told that they would be here in January, and the company Total Construction that had been assigned through our insurance, they had not been able to get us on their schedule. Then at that point, I contacted Maurice again, and we were told that they would either make sure that they were able to get here or they would get somebody else assigned. At that point, they came and picked up the components of the window so that they could take it to their shop and reassemble it with the new components and then come back and install it. There's been a couple of scheduling changes since then. I think 3 days have been assigned and then rescheduled. And so I spoke with them again last week just to confirm when they could be here. They planned on coming at the beginning of this week. They were able to come today and work on it, but they didn't have the window assembled. And so they struggled with that a little bit. They did they did, have everything removed now, and they've assured us that they will have a new window assembled. So as of now, that's what I can report on that. If you drive by there on your way out, you can see the progress. The last thing I wanted to just touch on is Flex Day. So Flex Day has continued to be something that we've offered to students as a reward for those that are meeting and we're exceeding our expectations. So essentially towards the end of each semester, for those that are meeting academic benchmarks, and they can be checked out of school for the day. We have attempted to adjust those benchmarks to be a little bit more strict about it. We want it to be a reward, not just something everybody gets, right? So last semester we had, it was just under 40% of students that were able to achieve that plus the reward. So I'll have that coming up again at the end of this semester with the same criteria. So it'll be interesting to see how that number changes. One other thing that I forgot to put on here before I sent it was we've also been having voluntary vision meetings for next school year as a high school staff. So we've had 2 of them recently. Each of them have gone for about an hour and a half, which is longer than anticipated, but get everybody in a room and start talking. And that's kind of how it goes. But we've reviewed everything from whether we want to use planners as all passes to common grading practices. And so it's been a lot of good discussion. And so we will plan to have one more. I don't think we're that too, but there's 10 things that have come up in these meetings that have led to good discussion. I want to be able to continue this. So we'll have one more of those before summer, so that going into summer, we can have all those necessary changes that need to be made and potentially work for the start of next school year. The last thing I add on what Mrs. Fletcher reported for the student leadership groups. So Joe Coles has been in contact with Brian and I pretty regularly throughout the year at certain intervals to check out our progress and see if we need anything. It's been very good to work with. He is coming back to work with the groups, which was great. He was communicating with us last week and wanted to know exactly what we thought. So really, talking to Mr. Fleck and the students, we found out that really we just need some time to troubleshoot some errors with somebody who has perspective outside of our school. And so the kids are going to have time with him to fill him in on what they've done to this point of the year, some struggles that they've had, and talk through how they can address those. They continue to do awesome things, and I'm really excited for the meeting next year. I think that especially the high school, middle school group, which I'm obviously more involved with, I know they have things in place to start off next school year on a good note. They've also been involved already in talking through how back to school could be changed for this next year. So the kids have become really involved, and I think the more we've seen, really, I would say, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say what we saw at the beginning was, 1 or maybe 2 students that was willing to take lead. But now I think we're seeing a lot more engagement from the entire groups. And so at some point prior to the beginning of next school year, we'll give students an opportunity to lead that if they don't want to continue as part of the leadership program. And we'll also finalize our procedure for adding new members. So what I've kind of heard in talking to some students is that there are other students that would like to be involved. So I'm anxious to see how that works. Any questions for me? Thank you.
All right. So, enrollment up there on the top of my report, it really hasn't changed much last few months. Something that crossed my mind when Gary, Mr. Nish was presenting, I don't think maybe on even one of our agendas, was the aptitude website, kind of an update on that. So we're scheduled to go live April 21st. That's not a hard deadline, that's a soft deadline. They have the app in beta mode right now, just a mode for just a couple of us and that just happened over the week for a couple of us to pilot. They haven't done the content integration yet. As a leadership or steering team, we've been meeting about weekly, sometimes bi-weekly. We have one more meeting, a couple of weeks, where we'll discuss, not this week, but the following week, we will discuss kind of when we get it there, how we're going to market it, and get people kind of excited for it. And, you know, part of the logic too, I think, in my mind, when we started having these conversations was, you know, it makes sense to open it up at the start of the school year, but sometimes they made it sound like spring is a better time to do that, to work out some of those things. And have it, you know, ready for, get a lot of those little things worked out. So far, it seems to be a pretty simple process. I'm waiting for, okay, this is what we thought was gonna happen, and I still say that, this is what really happened, but so far that moment hasn't come. It seems to, you know, be doing what they said. So hopefully that trend continues. On to my report. Don't have a lot of things, but the things I do have a lot of information. So we're going to start with some of our staffing updates. In terms of teachers, we do on the agenda have an applicant that we'd like to request the board to hire for the high school special education position. That is to replace the position currently taught by Mrs. Looters. We'll have more information to get there. As you also, I'm sure, seen on the agenda, Mrs. Hageman has submitted her resignation letter, wants to focus more, just have more time to focus on things going on inside of her own home and her husband's business. So that's unfortunate, and that's not going to be an easy position to fill. Between that and the position vacated by Ms. Insminger, we still don't have at this point any applications that we feel comfortable bringing to the board at this point. So that's kind of where we're at. I know that it's kind of slim pickings out there with special education. I don't know what's going to happen between now and August to make that better, but we'll do our best to get those staff. I've had the thought, are we overstaffed? Without getting into effort and the financial issue associated with downsides of special education. Are we just overstaffed? You know, we just have a high percent of our students on. We're about 25%. That's about 2% above the state average. Our caseloads, even with 3 3/4 teachers, are probably above that. We're talking 12 to 15 kids, which if they're 12, sometimes the disability can determine what. Sometimes there are some schools that have full certified person. So it does, you know, that's a thought that we need to get more on these positions. I just don't think that's a conceivable reality at this point. And Mr. Dis is looking at like, really?
Yeah.
We didn't really talk about it a little bit. So those are the two we have. Hopefully we'll have great make sure. On that note, we did get, which I know you've all know about, and so I won't hang on this a long time. But our elementary team that works with Kate Cisco they're in the Friends of Autism Award from the Nebraska Autism Spectrum Disorder Network. Kind of a big deal. I think there's a lot of people that are nominated for this. This is like all high schools throughout the state. It's one award per year. I think they just knew how dedicated meaning we work so much with this network with supplemental supports that I think they just really knew how invested we were in our kids. And yeah, we have good people working. We've got a lot of training. Now we're going to have some holes, obviously, but those team members were I don't have it listed in any. I think this is the order they were listed on the photo. Beverly Smith, who's a para for us, we know Julie Kettlehay, is also a para here for us in elementary. Mrs. Graff, a local teacher. Mrs. Kosker, who's a classroom teacher. Mrs. Hageman, who was the special education case manager. Mr. A, who's the PE teacher, and Mrs. Schulbe, who's the art teacher. and myself. So, yeah, that was a great honor. We were really appreciated that they made that nomination. That was kind of nice, because sometimes we don't always get nice information in the good news. in this line of work. So, I do want to talk, this is kind of a follow-up. I don't want to, maybe won't say everything that's written on the page, so I'll try to get the main points here, but if you recall back in the fall, I gave a kind of an update as to how we are addressing some of our, I guess, goals and programming opportunities for kids that have behavior challenges for us that become difficult to the point of probably not functional, at least in the temporary amount, in the temporary future, to have these students in a general ed classroom because of behavior issues. And so some of the things we do, about the time I started, so about the 15, 16, 16, 17, we had just started a program at the service unit in Auburn. It's called the BFIT program. And I don't know I think I know some of the logic behind the decision. They felt like that's what we call a tier 3 support. So that's like your kids that really need that support. And we slowly back it away. Service unit had that, but they didn't have it called tier 2. Push in. So they wanted to, and there was just demand was going down across the service. I think a lot of the bigger schools have just pretty much built in their own programming internally. We're just kind of small for that. That's not a reality for us. And so I talked about, how do we deal with that? We still don't have a lot of really good answers there. We kind of build our plan around each kid as the opportunities present themselves. But I want to talk a little bit about how we get to that point with the students, and maybe some of the limitations. Some of this stuff, you work in this business so long and forget the average person just doesn't know. Maybe just it'd be good to take a couple minutes here just to kind of explain. So you really can't have a conversation about student discipline, not have a conversation about special education. Because in my experience, usually when you have a behavior challenge, there's usually something internally that's positive. And typically it's associated with something that Individuals with Disabilities Act, or IDA, would identify as disability. And without getting into all the details, there's something called a manifestation of disability. And what this means is through the IEP process, for the special education process, if a reasonable team or someone, it's a team. So if the team within the IEP team, knowing the law, knowing how it works, would say that this behavior is a byproduct of the disability, then very limited on what you do from a discipline standpoint. So this would be the cases if you have a student, thinking more in the elementary now, which is where I spend the lion's share of my time. In the elementary, you might have students, especially in the early grades, you might have students that don't have a verified disability, but a reasonable educator would say that they should have known that, or that it was predictable. So we go, or if you're in the process of identifying it, once a reasonable educator with a reasonable understanding of how the process works would say that student might have a disability, kind of the threshold with the forceful use of that kindness. Once they say that, that student has, or should say that, is a better way of putting it. once the educator should recognize that reality, home protections of IDEA would come into play, which would include the manifestation of disability. If you have a student who has a disability and the team would determine that the disability is directly or closely linked to behavior, whether it's something like oppositional defiance, that's a common. Then the school is limited to 10 days of removal from the school or from the classroom setting, say, throughout the year. 10 days on which it happens. So let's say a student has to go home. In this part, the attorneys will say it's kind of, but you don't want to get into an issue where you're arguing about how you're feeling. Basically. So you have to have to remove, get a new emergency exclusion of 11 o'clock. That counts as a day because it's a significant portion of a day. So you've got 10 days like that, and then from a discipline standpoint, you can't do that anymore. So really, the only time you can expel a student is if there's some sort of weapon or firearm involved, and even then you have to legally provide off-campus education for the student. So as you might be able to understand, as administrators, we're told, be careful how you use your days. Because once you get in, you're out. Well, be careful about how you use it. What do you call it? It sounds like semantics, but it can affect you. Call it a suspension versus an emergency exclusion. One is you're removing the child from the setting until you come up with a plan versus we're disciplining the child. They have the same result in terms of days, but in terms of discipline, one is considered a discipline, one it is, but it's not an emergency exclusion. It's really it's a protection, and then you buy a few days to come up with as a team. So we have, and I don't think it's just that. I think it's schools across the United States. I do think it's tied to kids being stuck at home for a long period of time during the pandemic. Less of these types of concerns of just students more and more that can show up and don't have all of the tools and skills that they need to be at grade level, not academically, but social emotion. And so the question then becomes, well, what do we do? Well, really the best thing to do is work. Use the tools you have here. So don't make excuses. Do the best you can with the situation you have, and use the tools. So the service unit I mentioned, I did include a couple of the flyers on the subsequent pages that show Danny and Cassie who become regulars for us, and then kind of the process is pretty vague, but honestly, you probably wouldn't want a lot of. So that kind of spells it. And, we started the school year really not knowing how that would work. So positive and negative. Positive is we have this, but we didn't have in the past. Negative is now we don't have, if we get to a situation where the team decides, I'll discuss that in a moment, where the team decides that the student it's in the best interest of the student and peers or her peers to be removed from the setting, then we don't have a good destination. We have situations where we have a student who we kind of don't want internally. We have a student who another student we kind of internally. We have a third student currently that we're having to transport to another location. But really, we've tried to reach out to all of them. I've reached out to the actors. We won't contract with you before. Lincoln sort of, kind of has some options, but even first off, it's important to know too. This is not an administrative decision. For example, Mr. Nish and myself can't just say, we can't. This is a student we can't handle in the classroom. Got to go to this. They won't take the child. They say you need that Secondly, it can't be a unilateral decision. It needs to be a team decision. So the IEP team would have to agree, which would include the administrator, the classroom teacher, but also your special education personnel, who are kind of instructed to look out for the best interest of the student in question. That team, the parents and others, who decision of this magnitude is certainly involved in school psychology. That team would make a decision that we're going to do that based on the data we have, and then we're going to identify thresholds in data that's going to tell us when it's okay to transition back maybe from a tier 3 to a tier 2 setting, and then from a tier 2 to a tier 1 setting. I just tell you this because it's important to know when you sometimes see some of these larger price tags, and usually they're temporary. They're going to, we're not doing this just to take the student and move them over here just so we have to deal with them. We're doing this as an education process. We want to catch that student up further here. But it does tie our hands a little bit compared to what a more traditional approach might be to what are considered behavior problems. So I just wanted to share that and let you know kind of how we're handling that, especially this spring. It's the time of year that you really, this is the time of year you start to see some of those situations kind of bottle up with behavior. It's just that time. On one of my last item on my report, I did want to give a little bit of an update on LD 583, which is Governor Pillen's plan to address property tax. I think I talked about this a couple months ago. This bill did, which you would expect given the climate. You've got support of the governor, which we've never had before. You know, Ricketts never was in one who was never in a situation financially to do this sort of thing without, you know, not be able to have a surplus of money and not have to raise any taxes, which would be a non-starter, which really for any conservative legislative or governmental person. So Pillen has the money without having to generate new revenue. One, but two, he does seem a little more willing to work with all the parties and kind of let the process take it where it will. Now, of course, it's not what I want, and I'll talk about that, but I suppose we'll take it. So this past first round of the bill, if you follow the legislature all this year, you know, it's a little contentious. Senator DeBoer and there's a few of the more progressive liberal senators who basically over some of the transgender stuff that said if you're going to basically we're going to sink everything, and so which led to a rule to they were filibustering every single bill, which usually bills just pass. Procedural bills they just pass on a voice vote without any discussion. They were taking every single bill and pulling out, which meant nothing. Literally nothing. So fully dysfunctional. Led to something that scares me a little bit. They did a temporary rules to just change, but I don't know exactly how, but make so that wouldn't happen. To do away with filibuster at least to the end of this year, and then the rules will come back. I think whether it's rural versus urban, whether it's liberal versus conservative, whether it's, you know, it's not always a left-right in politics in Nebraska. You know, sometimes you've got very conservative, they're on the outside of an issue than other conservatives simply because of the geography, the land or the territory that they represent. And I think it's important, since we do have a unicameral, to have a system of checks and balances in place, which means it's harder to get a bill to become a law. Oftentimes we think about all the bills that over the years that I've been involved with, all the bills that haven't passed because of the you need basically 33 votes to get anything through the unicameral. out of 33 out of 49, but you don't have a second half. You don't have that checking round. And so it is kind of a nice protection. I think, I think about the bills that we haven't got, but on the flip side, I think probably a lot more bills that would have done a lot of harm that haven't. And it doesn't matter which side of the issue you're on. I don't. So I think it's good to have that. They to an extent, they temporarily suspended those so they can get some work done. So what does that mean for LD 583? So this was the governor's bill to bring in property tax aid through the school system, because everyone knows the school gets the biggest chunk of the property. And if we can target that issue, whether you think schools are spending like crazy and they need to be kept under control, or if you think the problem is a lack of funding. I would say this plan is kind of in the middle. So it acknowledges that part of the problem, but what I kind of like about it, acknowledges that part of the problem is a lack of funding from the state. And so it's not the traditional narrative is, well, blame your local school board because they're the ones levying the tax. No, we're just following the rules that have to follow to run the school. So this would generate 257, as modeled by the governor's office, about 257,000 additional revenue for the district. It does come with the condition that there's a revenue growth cap. It's 3%, but for the size of the district, we are up to 9% with a 2/3 or 3/4. I took the 2/3 of mine, and now I'm taking 3/4. 5 out of 6 board members have to vote for, if you want, you can go up to 9% with a 5 out of 6 vote on the budget, which I know we've never done a 9% revenue growth in the time I've been. And so that's not a concern. So they do have some soft caps in terms of revenue growth. It's a little stricter for the metro schools. If I have a critique for this bill, you've heard me talk about the Nebraska plan. This was the bill that the board president at Milford Public Schools district, very comparable to us, bigger, but same sort of situation, landlocked, very ag school because they're landlocked by Centennial and York and some of their neighbors. They have a small district, so they've got to go up to the dollar levy or get in that range anyway to benefit from state aid. They're an equalizer. There's a handful of the South, like Milford and us, that he come up with a bill. Senator Brandt prioritized it and tried to amend it. He got a hearing. He tried to amend it into this bill, and it would have what it would have done is it would have devalued property within the formula. So it would have devalued all property. So that's, which on the surface would sound like a good idea, but the conservatives that didn't really like it because they didn't want to see a bunch more money go to the metros, OPS, Millard, those LPS. They didn't want to see more, and so because it did that, it lowered the amount of resources that the district can get from a dollar levy within the TIOSA formula, lowering their resources relative to their needs, increasing their equalization. Now, what it did do is it devalued ag land more than it did commercial or residential within them. So it would have really targeted schools in our, well, all of them, but especially schools in our situation. It would have brought schools like JCC back into equalization, like they were, so that they would have started getting some of that equalization. Those would have been great things, but it came with a lot bigger price tag. And I think, as I've said before, what tends to be good for the big schools, good for us, because other than West Side, they're not equal. But all the other big schools are equalized like we are. And it would have, I think it would have been beneficial. The problem with, I don't want to say problem, but concern maybe with 583 is that it provides new funding in 2 ways. In the past, I said it's sped. I didn't quite understand, and I think some of this has been amended in legislation. So sped reimbursement, which is currently hanging out at about 42%, so 40% of our our state, age 5 to 21 special education expenses, we get reimbursed about 43%. But that's within the formula, so it counts against this as a resource within those. I thought that they moved it outside of the formula. They don't. They leave it inside of the formula. So they also provide something called foundation. So $1,500 per formula student within the formula. They bring you, and that flows in through the formula. So we see a windfall from the first 2 years because resources are immediate, means lag by 2 years, because it means you're based on prior year AFRs, financial reports. So resources would increase, needs wouldn't, when I say that. Regardless, the formula would be lopsided for 2 years until the other side would catch up. In year 3, then they take 900 of that per pupil aid and they move it outside the formula, which kind of is supposed to be a rough offset of what them losing for that spending. As for districts like equalized districts like us. The thing is, because it all flows into the formula, we get no new per pupil revenue because that's counted as a resource within the formula, which counts against us, inflates our resources relative to our needs, and reduces our equalization. The districts that aren't equalized have larger valuations and lower levies already. They're getting the additional per pupil aid and the additional special education rate. And so they're getting, you might maybe not a school like HPRS, I'm not picking a school like HPRS, a school like Lewiston doesn't need as much new revenue if they have more valuation, more revenue. They get the same amount of revenue, but they get more new revenue, which gives them the ability to lower their levy more relative to us. Kind of increases that difference between equalized and unequalized. I hope that kind of made sense. If it didn't, I'd be glad and we can go over it. But that's kind of where we're at. And with the governor's support in passing first round of debate, I say drop it in that. I know there's a big round of amendments now. As long as they don't dump in a bunch of stuff to really mess it up, I think it's a good bill. It will help us. It just could have been better. It would be my. I'd be glad to try to explain it more. I do the park board and do the parks and all that.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Ridinghouse? Hearing none, we'll move on to policy. Consider accepting the policy committee review or the recommendations for changes to policy as presented.
I'll make a motion to accept policy review and recommendation changes to policy list.
Second.
Motion by Jason, second by JW. Jason, do you have any discussion?
It looks like there were no changes. Or there were considered.
JW, you have any comment? Anybody else have any comment?
Maybe just some of the dialogue we have to email. I think on the complaint procedure, we just make sure that we have that in a place that it's accessible. People can use it. And I'm just trying to touch on the things that are in mind. And reimbursements, maybe we have some pretty strict rules we have to follow because of our external auditors. Maybe if we have those written out. Good. So not just verbal procedure, maybe some written procedure. I know the audit. There are our credit card rules, our reimbursement. So those are, and maybe any guidelines, a little stricter guidelines. I think staff does a really good job in those. Steakhouse is probably off limits when they're professional development. Still maybe give a ballpark dollar amount. Board approval per se, at least, and say, these are our procedures. Right.
I do have a question. When, like on the policies, so we have a corresponding form, are we reviewing the form with the policy?
That's a good point.
Are you talking about like the complaint?
Like the complaint policy, I mean, are we reviewing it and it has the follows the procedure, I mean, it has all the information.
Good point.
That was. um, And making everyone aware where it's at and all of us being versed in what the procedure is and where to find things and how to guide them to get the, the quickest answer that they need or to get that process started. So I think that's the homework we need to be taking on too, but that is something that I brought up. That it could be fine tuned a little bit. And I think that's a good thing is go through policy to look at any connecting documents to see if it can be updated or reviewed at least. And I think this basically is what's in the handbook of the policy, right, Brian?
It's supposed to be.
It's really
For me, that's a good point. We need to make sure you change it. Those when they call it, make sure that that's reflected. I think it's verbatim.
I think it's.
They may have bullets instead of, thinking through it. So that's one of the things I do with books, like elementary and high school every summer. I go through and make sure that all policy changes are reflected in handbooks. And then like secondary, then Mr. Ness, they kind of go through their things. So that's probably something we'll want to involve this committee more. Sure that we'll have to make sure they're aware of some of the substantive types of changes, not the policy changes, like if we're going, like, for example, when we, I don't think there was any reservation to it, but that way they're aware of it before we get, like, say, we're going to freeze communities or something.
Any other discussion? Right, we're reviewing this, are we going to approve it?
The way I word it usually is just, we did, is just, we're voting to accept the committee.
Everybody understand the motion? All right, so roll call vote. Hope?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
AW?
Yes.
Bobby?
Yes.
And Lisa, yes. Motion carries 6-0. Then we move on to new business. Consider approving the core services agreement between Covey Public Schools and Educational Service Unit for school year 2023-24 as presented. Motion by Mary, second by Bobby. Mary, do you have any discussion? Bobby? Anybody else have any discussion?
There's just approving this doesn't cost anything once in a while. There might be some really marginal costs associated with professional development. Those were just like a $20, something like that. But this just authorizes the service unit to provide the services that they are really for instructors to provide, and they've got the staff development, technology, instructional materials for the 3 days.
Any other discussion or question? Hearing none, roll call vote, Mary? Jason?
Yes.
JW?
Yes.
Bobby?
Yes.
Lisa, yes, vote
Yes.
motion carries 6-0. Move on to item E, consider approving the Education Foundation expenses for donations to and corresponding expenses for a new press box LED sign, 21 student copies of the rewritten published book, totaling $480.95, and up to $1,300 for t-shirts for the elementary field day and spring concert.
I move to approve the Education Foundation.
I'll second.
Motion by Mary, second by Jason. Mary, do you have any discussion? Jason?
No, other than, give the option to.
Yeah, it won't be near as much, but we kind of discussed it, we worried, especially trying to protect money in the foundation for the DC trip, we want to make sure that, we weren't doing things. The idea was to help families with the t-shirt cost, so what Mrs. DeGraff did is it was kind of my idea, my suggestion. We're gonna ask the families to pay for their own t-shirts unless they check the box that says it's confident. That way, it's not a free meal, reduced meal, a pay meal, the family wants to check the box. But I don't want it all. It's all, so it won't be that, I'm sure.
And so clarification on the LED sign is that the foundation is not funding that from our funds, but if there are donations that would come in, then those could be transferred to the school. That way, that allows those donors to receive a tax credit for that and so we're not taking any, that's in the foundation. Any other questions? Hearing none, roll call vote. Jason?
Yes.
JW?
Yes.
Bobby?
Yes.
Lisa, yes. Hope?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0. All right, to move on to item C, consider approving renewed teacher contracts for school year 2023-24 as presented.
I'll make a motion to approve renewed teacher contracts for the school year 2023-2024.
Second.
Motion by Hope, second by JW. And Hope, do you have any discussion? JW. Any other discussion?
Could be for everyone other than the ones that have are moving along, so Johnny, Angela. So, yeah.
Keelan?
Yeah, I knew.
Okay. All right. Voting JW,
Yes.
Bobby? Yes. Yes. Hope?
Yes.
Mary? Yes.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0. Consider accepting Ms. Johnny Hagan's resignation at the end of the 2022-2023 school year. And I will make that motion with regrets to accept Mrs. Johnny Hagan's resignation at the end of the 2022-23 school year. Motion by Lisa, second by Bobby. I don't have any discussion, Bobby. Anybody else have any discussion? All right. Hearing none, roll call vote. Bobby?
Yes.
Lisa, yes. Hope?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
JW?
Yes.
Motion 0. And then we will consider approving the full-time teacher contract for Austin Martin beginning of the school year 2023-2024 as presented.
I make a motion to approve the full-time contract for us. Being school year 2023-2024.
I'll second it.
Motion by Jason, second by Jason. Any discussion? Hope, any discussion?
No.
Any other discussion?
So just graduating from Peru. Did how many years? 5 years of military. And so upper 20s, interested in helping out coaching. I don't think we zeroed in on what specific. Yeah.
Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none, roll call vote, ECS vote,
Yes.
Mary? Yes. Jason?
Yes.
JW?
Yes.
And Bobby? Yes. Motion carries.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion by Jason, second by Mary. Roll call vote. Oh,
Yes.
Mary? Jason?
Yeah.
JW?
Yes.
Bobby?
Yes.
And Lisa, yes. Motion carried, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Everything.
Done.